Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the VCTA Broadband Association and Cox Communications, connecting their Virginians to their government. We're pleased to connect you with Jennifer Boysko. Good to see you, Jennifer.
Good to see you,
Good
Woody.
to see you. Scott Surovell, good to see you, sir.
It's always a pleasure to be on your show.
You had mentioned earlier, this is the 47th anniversary of Roe versus Wade. Tell us why that's important.
Women need to be able to make their own decisions about their decisions, when they're gonna start a family and with whom. I have been a long time proponent of giving women the decision-making power, and in Virginia we've watched that erode over a number of years. And as a former member of NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia and someone who's carried legislation on this for a number of years, I believe this year we are going to codify a woman's right to make the decision for herself, especially looking at what's going on at the federal level with the Supreme Court taking up cases right now.
A lot of changes in the General Assembly this year that involve women. Talk to us about those.
That's right. We have the first Speaker of the House, female woman, Eileen Fillercorn, in the history of Virginia. It's very exciting. Also have the first Speaker, Senate Pro Tem, Louise Lucas. So women are leading in our committees and stepping up and taking leadership positions all over. It's really exciting to see that.
What do those changes mean for you?
Taking the majority this year, I guess it's the first, I ended up picking up 4 new committees. The Commerce and Labor Committee, the Courts of Justice Committee, the Transportation Committee, and the Privileges and Elections Committee, and still on the Rehabilitation and Social Services Committee. But that was a big change for me. Also, this is my 11th General Assembly session. I've been in the minority now for 10 years, so it's nice to get a little more favorable reception for your bills, and also we're able to push bills that we were never able to push before, and so we're able to think about trying some new ideas and some new policies that just were dead on arrival before. And so, it's really a new day here. I mean, this is the first time we've had Democratic majorities in both the House, Senate, and the Governor's Mansion in 26 years. So there's a lot of people looking to get a lot done this session. So it's really busy.
So what was it like for you this past Monday when we had a lot of demonstrators in the streets of Richmond?
It actually wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, there weren't any incidents outside with the protesters. Security was obviously up. But I had a group of people that came and met with me, about 5 constituents and about 20 other people, the Virginia Citizens Defense League, and we sat down and had a conversation about some of the bills that we're discussing. It was a pretty, rational, unheated discussion. They gave me their feedback about some changes they thought, or things that ought to be considered. They still didn't like the bill, but they pointed out some flaws that they thought we ought to think about, and it was helpful to have a dialogue. And and I was able to actually tell them what the bills actually do instead of what they read on the internet. Once you actually describe to them what the bills are and what was proposed and the changes that were made, I think they feel a lot more comfortable that their government's listening to them, and that that we're not going for the most extreme most extreme version of every single bill we could pass. And so that was that was how the conversation went. But in general, the protests went fine. A lot of people showed up. A lot of people brought guns. Wish they wouldn't, but they did. And luckily there was no incidents.
And Senator, you had a similar experience. I know you had conversations with those who showed up as well.
I did. I probably had 5 or 6 different meetings with the people who were advocating for for maintaining their ability to carry a gun wherever they wanted to. And like Scott said, we had a civil, reasonable conversation. I also dispelled some of the myths and thanked them for coming inside to talk to me so that we could actually have a discussion. And this has been going on every year. So as you're well aware, Martin Luther King Day, for some reason, is the day that the gun rights advocates come to Virginia, to our General Assembly. But I'm glad to have an open and continuing dialogue with folks, as well as my friends back home who are concerned about gun violence prevention. We've passed some really important laws over the past few days out of the Senate, and expect that they will get adopted in the House as well. Scott was the leader on the red flag law, the emergency protective order, 1 gun a month, background checks,
Local authority.
and local authority, which are reasonable, common sense things that will be saving lives, we believe.
And Scott, let's talk about the one that has created the most controversy, and that's the red flag law. What does that really do?
Actually, we're going to take our vote on that today. We finished working on the amendments on the floor yesterday, but right now all the law says that if somebody complains to law enforcement, the police have to conduct an investigation. Then a petition is either signed by 2 law enforcement or the Commonwealth Attorney under oath. An impartial magistrate then considers the allegations and decides whether or not the person poses a risk to themselves or other people by virtue of the fact that they own a firearm. An emergency substantial risk order is entered. That order is then taken to the person's house. They're given an opportunity to voluntarily surrender their firearms. If they voluntarily surrender their firearms, then they have to appear at a hearing in 2 weeks. If they don't surrender their firearms, then the police officer, or if they don't surrender all of their firearms, then the police officer can go get a search warrant to enter the home and remove the weapons.
And that search warrant has to be issued on probable cause?
Yes, just like any other search warrant, because if one of these orders is entered and somebody still has guns in their possession, they're now committing a criminal offense. So there's a hearing in 14 days. The hearing is a civil proceeding. You can conduct discovery. There's provisions that I've built that I negotiated into the law, which allow the person who's accused to get a continuance if they feel like they need more time to prepare or more time to get a lawyer. And then at the hearing, the proponent has to prove, which the government, the Commonwealth Attorney has to prove their case by clear and convincing evidence, which is a higher evidence standard. It's actually got more due process protections than a domestic violence protective order, which can get you kicked out of your house. Personally, I think getting kicked out of your house is worse than having your gun taken away from you for a few weeks. So we've built a lot of due process protections into it to make sure that people just can't file false allegations. They have to be investigated by the police, which we don't do in domestic violence protective orders. I think we've got a really good product that's come. We've probably made about 20, 25 changes responding to the criticism we've heard to the bill.
Now, this kind of red flag law has been adopted in a number of other states.
Yeah.
Has it proven to be effective?
That's my understanding, is that it has saved lives. It has gotten people who are really at risk, gotten their guns out of their hands for a temporary moment, and it has stood up to constitutional scrutiny as well.
So talk to us a little bit more about some of the other legislation that you are pursuing. I know you and Scott both have a bill that deals with driver privileges and expanding those privileges.
Right. So both Scott and I represent very diverse communities in Northern Virginia, and this is the #1 issue that I've heard from the immigrant population, is the ability to have a driver's license. I think it makes good economic and safety sense because, one, allowing someone to get either a driver's license or credential gets them to have to pass the test, so we know that they are safe and understand the laws, get insurance so that if there is an accident, you would have some remedy to get your vehicle fixed. And then also gives people the opportunity to get to work or to take their children to school. Those are real kitchen table problems that people are facing, and this is something that I think Scott and I both have been working on this since 2016 in different forms. We believe that this year is going to be the year that we are able to get something through and help hundreds of thousands of people who currently are stuck in the shadows.
So where do these bills stand right now in terms of committee work?
They're both in the Transportation Committee, and will probably be heard, my guess is about a week from today. And then they have to probably go to the Finance Committee after that. They'll probably be voted on right before crossover, sort of early to late February. But you know, I can't tell you how important it is. About 1 in every 4 people who I represent was born in another country. And I've heard the same thing as Jennifer about how important it is. And you know, this has been done in I think 17, 18, 19 states now. And in those states that have done it, in addition to all the safety effects and the more insurance that Jennifer's talked about, they've also seen a huge decline in hit and runs. People are also much more likely to cooperate with law enforcement if they have government ID and report things to the police because they don't feel uncomfortable about not having ID and having to explain why. So there's all kinds of public safety benefits that come along with this.
Yeah.
So what are some of the objections that you've heard over the years about this legislation?
Well, the Republicans have been hesitant. As I'm sure you've seen, the campaign season typically does a lot of fear mongering, saying, you know, that they try to scare people about our immigrant population. However, we know that the immigrant population is a great asset to our community, that they are paying taxes, they are working hard, their children are working hard as well. In fact, I'm also the patron of the bill that would expand in-state tuition, and I just ran into former Secretary of Education and now President at George Mason University, Ann Holton, who is very excited about the bill and looking forward to supporting it. So we believe that enabling people to be productive and get an education, get themselves to work and school, makes Virginia a better place.
Payday loans, do we still have more of those institutions than we have McDonald's hamburgers?
Yeah, we do. There are more title lenders on Route 1 than McDonald's. And I've got 3 bills to deal with that. And there's also a big sort of omnibus bill that our caucus chairman, Senator Mamie Locke, is carrying, along with Delegate Lamont Bagby out of Richmond. And something's going to happen this year. I'm not sure what yet. But the situation we have in Virginia right now is just untenable from a lot of our perspectives. In addition to having legalized car title lending at 267% interest rates.
267%.
Yeah, and that's legal. We also have these, from my point of view, illegal online lenders that are making loans to people at like 300 to 400% interest rates using Indian tribes. Where they come in and they make you sign a loan on the internet agreeing to be bound by tribal law and be subject to arbitration at some Indian tribe in Michigan, where you have to go to the chief if you have a problem with how they're getting treated. These things are totally out of control. Basically, the more we regulate, the more they push to this unregulated activity. And I've been trying to get the unregulated activity regulated for about the last 3 or 4 years now. But I think we're going to get something done this year. The question is whether or not we focus on the real abusers, which are the people who make these open-end line of credit loans or these online loans, or whether we do an across-the-board re-regulation of everybody. And the omnibus bill, we want to put a 36% rate cap on every kind of one of these high-risk loans, people that have sort of 500 to 600 to 650 credit scores. But we would do a 36% rate cap, require them to be only installment loans where they have equal payments every month, no balloon payments at the end, consumer protections on how they can collect the loans. We'll see. We're getting a lot of pushback. There's about 15 lobbyists fighting us on this. But you know, we have the facts. We have the policy on our side. I haven't met I have met a couple people that think 300% interest loans are okay, and that, you know, if you're stupid and sign one, that's your problem. But from my point of view, that's about 10-15% of the public feels that way. Most people think this stuff is immoral and ought to be illegal and needs to be, you know, highly regulated. So I'm optimistic we'll make some progress on that.
I take it it's a similar problem in your district as well.
Yeah, I mean, people being taken advantage of because they are really, you know, on the margins. One of the things that I'm really excited about this session is we are really taking on those people who have been disenfranchised in all, you know, realms of public policy this year, from making sure that we are providing protections for our LGBTQ community, for our immigrant community, women and families, and people who, you know, have seen their civil rights disenfranchised in the judicial process as well. So it's really exciting to be a part of the General Assembly at this point in time, where we are really working to try to address some of the needs that have been so long pushed to the back of the bus, let's just say.
And of course, one of your items of interest relates to transgender students.
That's right. And yesterday we passed 2 of the bills that I have sponsored that will make. I was contacted by one of my constituents this morning who said, "You're saving lives." One bill will set up a process for the Department of Education to lay out the groundwork for how our transgender students should be treated to protect their civil rights and work against discrimination in the schools. The other allows, and we already allowed this in when you get your Social Security card, your driver's license, your U.S. passport, to remove the stipulation that undergoing a gender reassignment, you would not have to go through the medical surgery, which allows you to have more cohesive documentation.
What about birth certificates?
That's what I'm talking about,
okay,
is the birth certificate.
okay.
Yeah.
And I've got the driver's license.
Yeah.
Do you have something
yeah.
on conversion therapy?
Yeah, I do.
That yesterday too.
Yeah, we passed. I have 2 bills, 2 or 3 actually, but yeah, we passed at the Transportation Committee last week my legislation removing the requirement that you designate your gender on your driver's license, or actually I think you can put an X, X if you're non-binary, but the major bill that I'm carrying in that area has to do with conversion therapy. The Virginia Department of Health prohibited the provision of conversion therapy to minors by regulation last year, but we need to put that in the code so that no governor can ever walk that back. You know, right now we have there are providers out there, licensed medical providers, who feel it's appropriate to try and convert children to a different sexual orientation, and all the studies show that all that does is increases depression, suicide risk, and you know, if you're a child, you don't get a choice. If your parent says you're going to do this, you got to do it, and that's sort of when I think the state can step in and make it clear that, you know, first of all, every single psychiatric, whether it's every psychiatric board, counselors, the social workers, licensed professional counselors, psychology boards have all said that this is an unethical practice. It doesn't work. It's completely discredited, and we need to put that in the code to make sure it's, you know, people don't, licensed counselors don't feel like they can do this, and if they do, they'll be subject to both professional discipline and malpractice cases. So we've got that. That's going to be in the code after this session. Delegate Patrick Hope's carrying that bill with me on the House side too.
And then today in committee, we will be looking at across the board discrimination protections. Mm-hmm. So I've carried the public employees discrimination bill, okay, but we're gonna have an omnibus that we're working with Senator Adam Eben and Jennifer McClellan on, just an omnibus bill, which is going to be exciting to see that you know, we're going to be finally a welcoming and friendly state for all.
Of course, the other big victory already is the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment.
That's right, Woody. It's very exciting. I mean, we've heard from people all over the country, and even folks from other countries are excited to see that finally, at long last, the equal, you know, we are the 38th state to ratify the ERA, and it will go back to Congress, hopefully to be enshrined in the Constitution to give women equal protection under our U.S. Constitution.
Got a few hurdles yet. I see the administration is going to challenge what came out of Virginia in terms of the Equal Rights Amendment.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of a role there is for the Trump administration, but they're trying to create a role. They issued this DOJ opinion trying to push the archivist around, but yeah, apparently the arbiter of who decides whether a constitutional amendment is legitimate or not is first the United States archivist who lives in the Department of or the U.S. Archives. And he has to make a decision, and then after that, it'll probably be challenged in the courts. There's already lawsuits filed to both challenge whether ratification is legitimate and to legitimize ratification. I'm sure DOJ will try and intervene, but there's a lot of cases that also say that Congress is the final authority as to whether or not something's ratified or not. And Congress can also extend deadlines. Mm-hmm. They could accept these ratifications retroactively. There are bills pending in both the United States Senate and the U.S. Congress to accept what's been done, and I'm optimistic. I mean, I think the Congress will pass it. I think Senator Mark Warner's working on it in the Senate, And I think there are Republican supporters of ERA in the Senate as well. So I'm optimistic that Congress might take action to make it clear that we're now done.
Yeah.
Healthcare issues, I know that's still a big concern in your district and throughout the Commonwealth and throughout the nation. What's happening in terms of affordable healthcare access in the Commonwealth?
Yeah, we continue to try to provide access to health care for everyone. Barbara Favola has a couple of good bills dealing with balanced billing, so that people don't get surprised by a enormous bill when they go to an emergency room, not knowing that their provider might not be in network. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, we continue to watch that and try to make sure that we are protecting people's access. I know that prescription drug costs are another big hurdle for people, and so we're continuing to watch on that. And of course, again, I go back to women's ability to make decisions for themselves about their reproductive health care, continuing to be a big issue today.
As a matter of fact, there are a number of code matters that are being looked at that have restricted women's rights here.
So repealing the targeted regulations on abortion providers, we call them TRAP laws, that are only directed at abortion providers of all medical. So you can go to a podiatrist, you can go to an oral surgeon. They do not have the same regulatory requirements that have tried to be put upon the abortion providers. We believe that politicians shouldn't be making these decisions. A woman with her healthcare provider, and if she chooses with her house of worship, should be able to make decisions about when a woman chooses to start her family and with whom.
And there's a requirement for an ultrasound, as I recall.
Yeah, I was here for that big mess back in 2012, I think it was, and it was a mistake when we put it on the books back then. It's a mistake to still have it on the books. I think forcing a woman to undergo a medically unnecessary procedure that her doctor's not recommending, and then making them take a picture and put it in her medical file for perpetuity is actually kind of punitive. I mean, a lot of people, going through this process is not a happy thing. A lot of times, pregnancies have to be ended because there's problems with the pregnancy, and being reminded of that and having to, it can be torture for some people. I'm also carrying a bill that would codify Roe v. Wade and Griswold v. Connecticut. Roe v. Wade was the 47th anniversary today, and that's the U.S. Supreme Court case that codifies women's right of choice. There was also a case before that in 1967 which made clear that all Americans have a right to contraception. The government can't tell people they can't have contraception. And with the recent changes on the Supreme Court, a lot of people are worried that they might walk that back. There's also a case pending right now, and so we're going to chisel that into the Code of Virginia to make sure that no matter what the Supreme Court does, people in Virginia have the exact same rights they do today as they do if the Supreme Court decides to walk us backwards. And so I'm hopeful that bill will pass this year.
That's right, and I'm the chief co-sponsor for that as well. This has been something, these issues have been something that I've worked on my whole adult life. When I was in college, I hosted a debate between Sarah Weddington, who was the attorney in Roe v. Wade, and Phyllis Schlafly, who was the head of the Eagle Forum, who was vehemently opposed. It was a very interesting and exciting night, but these are issues that are so important to people in their homes. They should be able to make these decisions. I personally had a very high-risk pregnancy where my daughter was forced to be born 2 months early. I was told I should never have another pregnancy again because I would likely die. And so politicians don't know what's going on in a family's kitchen table, right? They're not sitting at the table with folks. We don't need to be making decisions for other people, making decisions, around these issues. And a lot of the regulations that we currently have are punitive and shaming the woman for making those decisions, and that's not okay.
Another significant decision you both will have to make this session deals with redistricting. Last year there was a resolution passed that calls for a 16-person commission or committee that's supposed to redraw not only the state legislative and senatorial districts, but the congressional districts as well. If they can't do it, it goes where? The Virginia Supreme Court. I know there are concerns about that. Talk to us about what's likely to happen from your perspectives.
I don't even know if we agree on this.
I don't think we do.
Okay.
I'm co-sponsoring the enabling legislation for the
Yeah, we don't.
constitutional amendment.
Okay.
I believe that it has a number of protections that help me to feel comfortable and confident that it will be a fair and unbiased process. So it makes sure that there's public input, that there is diverse makeup of the committee that will be part of this commission from geographic areas as well as racial and ethnic background. And also, we are putting on guardrails for what the Supreme Court can do. So if somebody has a member of their family who might be in the General Assembly, which actually we have that,
Yes.
that person has to recuse themselves. It requires a special master com to really help guide the whole process. So it's not just the Supreme Court saying we're doing whatever we want. That these bills already, these situations already go to the courts. In fact, Congressman Don Beyer has a similar piece of legislation at the federal level, which directs kind of the same process that we're looking at for this constitutional amendment. I think it's important that we act this year so that we can get it enshrined, so that we know that we've got protection for the next decade at least, so that they can't surprise us if a member or two are absent to say we're redistricting, like they did when a senator went to a presidential inauguration a couple of years ago. So Scott might have a little different opinion.
Yeah, I'm a little different. So all the things that I think Jennifer just described are not in the constitutional amendment. They're all in the enabling legislation, which she's carrying, and that's the problem. Is, once you pass a constitutional amendment, it's forever. And there's nothing in the amendment about the criteria that's to be used to draw the districts. And that means that while we might have our criteria this year, if there's a change in the legislative control in the governor's mansion, in the future, the Republican can draw a Republican criteria bill. And then you have Republican gerrymandering being done by the nonpartisan commission because they have to follow Republican criteria. From my point of view, it just moves gerrymandering from one body to the other. The provisions about regional diversity, racial diversity are not in the constitutional amendment. The constitutional amendment also creates a process whereby only 2 members of the minority, 2 Republicans in the House, 2 Democrats in the Senate, whatever, can just blow the whole thing up and by rejecting the map. It only takes 2 votes to reject the map and throw it to the Supreme Court, which has been largely selected by the Republican Party over the last 20 years. In Virginia, the General Assembly elects the Supreme Court, and given that we haven't been in the majority in 26 years, there's not a lot of people up there that I think are very friendly towards our party, at least on a partisan basis. So I have a lot of concerns about chiseling that into the Constitution. I would like to see us just let computers do this. There's formulas you can use with compactness, contiguity, vote waste, which allow computers to draw districts that waste the least votes, are compact, are contiguous mathematically. You allow a little bit of human manipulation, a little bit after a computer draws the map. If that's done by a bipartisan committee, that'd be fine with me. But that's, I think, what we ought to do.
Well, thank you both for
Hey,
being
thank
here,
you.
Senator Jennifer Boysko and Senator Scott Surovell. Good luck.
Good to
Yeah,
see
thank
you,
you.
Liddy.
Thanks
Thanks
for
for
having
having us.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the VCTA Broadband Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.